Welcome to Back on the Broomstick,
a modern witch's spoken word grimoire,
where two witchy friends from way back are reconnecting to their pagan roots after a long period of mundanity.
We're rewalking the path of the wise and trying out all the latest spells, rituals, and magical theory in today's witchcraft and pagan practices.
So grab your wand and your incense,
your cauldron and your crystals,
and join us
as we get
Back on the Broomstick.
Hi, and welcome to Back on the Broomstick. I'm Layla.
And I'm Chelle.
And on this episode, we'll be recapping our wonderful weekend at the Sacred Space Conference. Who did we meet? Who did we get signatures for? How many tarot decks did Chelle buy? What amazing classes did we go to? And how did our meditation/ritual turn out?
Why are you skipping how many books you bought?
I was trying to hide that part and not mention it.
Yeah, well, you're throwing me under the bus. I'm throwing you under the bus.
Well, maybe because I bought a few more books than you bought tarot cards.
Well, that doesn't happen often.
It doesn't. So how many decks did you buy? And why do you need to give me the spoopy one?
Okay, so I think all in all, by the time I left, what did I get? Like 11 decks, I think.
Nice. And an oracle deck.
Seriously, and I'm not an oracle person.
You're not, but I know why you're an oracle person for this particular deck.
This particular deck. And it's literally only the second one I've got ever in life. Which, funny story. So we're going to talk about the other oracle deck I own in a minute, but this Laura Tempest Zakroff oracle.
Who does not love Tempest? Oh my gods.
Okay, so this is called the Liminal Spirits Oracle. Holy shit. If for nothing else, the artwork,
Yeah, to have how many cards are in that deck?
Not enough. It is 42 cards.
You get 42, which is the answer to life, the universe, and everything, by the way. You get 42 individual pieces of Laura Tempest Zakroff's art.
Actually, you get 43 because there's artwork on the back of the card. So every card has the same back, but it's also artwork. So technically you get 43.
Gorgeous, gorgeous. Her bags. I got one of her bags as a tarot bag this year, and I'm very excited.
I got two.
Not surprised.
Well, with all the tarot decks.
All right, so we did spend some time at vending. We spent a lot of time at workshops and rituals.
Wait. I got to tell them about the second oracle deck I have. It's the Goddess Oracle, which, back to the vendor story, we found a Goddess Oracle at one of the vendors. I found, but then compelled you to purchase it.
You did, and I appreciate that. Now, some of you may know that quite a few years ago, I lost almost everything I owned in a flood, including most of my witchy library. So I've been kind of slowly building it up now that we're kind of back to a stable place.
Are you really trying to rationalize all those books you bought?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I'm on that train.
All right, 100%. Just let me go with it. Now, one of the vendors there, the New Alexandrian Library, I believe.
You mean my new best friends?
Joe, yes. Joe, who runs the New Alexandrian Library. Now, this is a secondhand vendor. And they actually, all their proceeds go towards charity.
I think it's for the library itself, which is, again, why I had no problem buying 11 decks from them.
They are such nice people. And last year, we spent a bunch of money there. Someone a little more than I did.
No.
I loved their books, and Chelle and I both loved their tarot decks. So we went early this year to get a good selection.
Oh, smart choice, by the way. Smart choice.
Now, Chelle found in a hand-sewn little linen bag the Goddess Oracle that I loved. And honestly, I loved that it was in a handmade bag. And thankfully, she already had it, so I was able to buy it.
I think you talked about that bag half the weekend, to be honest.
I did. I freaking love that bag. The Goddess Oracle did not come with a box or a book, but it came with a handmade bag, and I absolutely love it. And I also got the Celtic Tree Oracle.
Ooh.
That was a good find.
She got all the things that I had already looked at.
That's true. Once Chelle went through those tarot decks, I had free reign. But the books, I was able to get anything I wanted. You did find me a great book there, the Witch's Bible Complete by Janet and Stuart Farrar. Thank you for finding that little gem.
Classic.
Yeah. So being able to buy some used things was really nice. But I think we're glossing over the most synchronistic thing that we saw sitting right on Joe's table when we walked in.
OMG. Oh, this was like mind blowing. So and we'll get into the ritual we did in a minute, but we picked these deities to invoke for this ritual, had this all planned out, and we chose a less common goddess, I guess is the best way to say it. So we walk into Joe and his table of wonderful goods, and what the hell do we see? Ellen of the Ways statue.
Standing right there in the middle of his table.
Like, who would have thought? Who would have thought?
Now, before we went, Chelle had managed to get a statue of each of the deities that we were going to be invoking for this ritual. So you already had an Ellen of the Ways.
Yep.
So I snatched her up so fast.
You did. And then I would be remiss if I did not mention this. So Layla gets this Ellen statue. We're super psyched. We're like, no shit. How could this happen? We immediately go up to our room to put it safe and sound.
On the altar that we'd set up on the table in our room.
Because yes, we set up altars in our hotel room. It's a thing.
Yeah.
I reach over to make my tea, and my sleeve knocked over Ellen.
Knocked her right over, broke her in two pieces.
It did not, you fibber. Well, technically, it was two pieces.
Thankfully, it was a very small piece, literally just her sleeve knocked off, and you couldn't even tell unless you knew that that had come off, that there was a problem. It glued right back on, no problem.
I know, but I felt like garbage.
You were very sweet about it. But no, our little Ellen, so we actually put a picture of the two Ellens in candles as we were getting ready to set up our ritual on the social media. So if you want to check it out, Back on the Broomstick on Instagram and Facebook.
All the socials were there.
That's right, we're there.
Let's start off with day one. Day one, I'm going to say, is our driving day. So tell the people how we left. What was the weather like when we left?
A literal snowstorm.
Literal snowstorm.
I was a little concerned that the snow wasn't going to stop before we left, but thankfully it did.
And we're going to fast forward like 5 days. The day we left Maryland, it was 85.
So weird, right?
So weird.
So we'd get down there on Wednesday, which is technically the day before the conference started.
We didn't want to drive the day of.
That's true.
So
we check into a temporary room.
We did. Oh, this is a story too. So we check into our temporary room, and then it's time for the opening ritual. Now, there's like what, eight different rooms that they do activities and workshops in?
Yeah, roughly. Maybe like 10 or 12.
So we go into this one particular room, which will be important as our story goes. This room will be important later on. So we go into this ballroom, and that was a good ritual, the opening ritual.
One of the things that Sacred Space does is the board of Sacred Space goes in ahead of time and kind of sets wards and sets space and calls what they call the egregore of Sacred Space, the entity that they have kind of created over doing this for so many years. And so at the opening ceremony, they call upon the spirit of Sacred Space. And they also call upon the idea of hospitality. They call upon the rules of hospitality. And they basically encompass the entire hotel, the whole place in Sacred Space.
Which, I love the name because they create Sacred Space for Sacred Space. And I mean, we're talking what? There was 500 people, 400 or 500 people
easily.
At this.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine a good majority of us all packed in one ballroom. So there was a lot of people, a lot of energy. The minute that ritual was done, it was like, oh.
You could feel the energy. It was really nice.
Yeah, which, by the way, it was a thing that did carry on and you could feel throughout the weekend. Even if you weren't doing a ritual or even if you weren't in a workshop, if you were just sitting in the lobby munching on a muffin and tea, you could feel that energy.
And it made community very easy. It was easy to talk to people, even for someone like me who's very shy and antisocial. It was very easy. You could feel the camaraderie and the energy between people. It was really nice. But I love that you mentioned the opening ceremony because that ritual was held in the same room. Now, the big ballroom was split up into 3 separate rooms, 3 very large separate rooms. And we had requested one of those for our ritual because we were making a large spiral, like a Fibonacci-esque spiral out of candles, and we needed the space. Interestingly, the room that we were chosen to do that ritual in also happened to be the room where the opening ceremony was done, and our ritual would be done just a few hours later after the dinner break. And so the energy was very much present and still there when we went in to set up for our ritual, and that was very cool.
Now, let's talk about this. So, next on our agenda for the week at Sacred Space was our ritual.
It was. We got to go on the first day after the dinner break. So there was the opening ceremony, there was one workshop. Well, there were several workshops in a time slot.
One time slot, and then
Yeah.
we were basically the second time slot.
Yeah, and then dinner break, and then immediately after dinner was our workshop on the first day.
This, we've done this 1,000 times and it's nerve-wracking each and every time.
It is. And we had just left our temporary room and we had to wait until 4 o'clock, which was a few hours before our ritual started at 7:30 to check into our new room. And of course, they were very busy because it was a very large conference.
Who got an upgrade? These girls.
Everybody at the Sheraton Baltimore North was super nice. I mean, everybody there was so nice. Everybody that works there is amazing. But the front desk people were great and they were very helpful. We went back to them several times because they kept telling us to come back, but we were nice, they were nice. And like Chelle said, they didn't have our room ready on time and they gave us an upgrade to like
The
the
top
top
floor.
floor. And it had its
You're gonna
own.
tell them about the club room, aren't you?
I am. Somehow, she was so cute. I can't remember her name, but she was so sweet. She's like, well, your room's not ready, but I found one that is, and we're just going to give you a little bit of an upgrade. Girl, she hooked us up so good.
I wish I knew her name because I would send her a gift.
Top floor, key card only entry club room that had 24/7 snacks, drinks, whatever you wanted. And
Free breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
I mean, holy cow. I felt pampered the whole weekend.
Well, we kind of were.
Yeah, we were. So we had an amazing room. And man, we met so many people on that dinner break. I think we talked to like 4 or 5 different people before we even got to go
Hilarious.
start our ritual.
Yeah, yeah. But, I think we didn't realize it at the time, but the significance of us being in that room was just cosmic.
It was one coincidence, synchronicity, wonderful thing that happened after another. And our ritual being in the same room as the opening ritual, it had so many layers. And as we go through this episode, we're going to talk about all the other rituals that happened in that room that seemed to each echo each other and they kept calling back to each other. We said some of the same phrases that weren't typical phrases you'd hear. We invoked some of the same energies. It was very, very interesting, the synchronicities that kept popping up and the layer upon layer of magic in that room. But first, we'll talk about our ritual.
Now, we really had a good time putting this together. And I think that the hardest part in retrospect, I don't think people understand what it's like to have to turn on and lay down like 250 candles. Like that took a minute. Like my finger is still sore from turning candles on.
So, if you do get to see the picture of the two Ellen of the Ways statues that we have on social media, you'll see that they're surrounded by cups filled with electronic candles.
You know who turned those candles on?
We did.
Us too.
Yeah. And then we laid them out. And if you've never seen 249 candles laid out, tea lights laid out in a spiral, check out our social media. It's kind of pretty. So, yeah, that was the hardest part. We set up 2 beautiful altars. Actually, Chelle did that. I made a few finishing touches, but other than that, it was all you. Gorgeous
Well,
job.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We got to have our Ellen of the Ways. We had Cernunnos, which are 2 deities that we both love working with. And it was really, really nice.
Even though one of the Ellen statues was broken.
Yeah, she didn't mind. I don't mind. It's all right. She fixed up good. So what we did was we had people come in and we talked about the Fool and the Fool's path being more of a spiral, like the Fibonacci spiral that connects everything, the golden ratio. We got into a little math nerdism.
I was going to say you had to get all mathy for a minute.
Yeah. And so we talked about that the Fool is with us on this journey on our path, that we are the Fool, and that this path isn't just a straight line, it's more of a spiral or a curve, and it connects all of us. And that you can be at multiple different places on this path at once. You can be anywhere on this path, and that you should always reconnect with that part of yourself that isn't afraid to take chances, to take leaps, whether you're at the beginning or the end. And in addition to that, we were going to be walking this spiral of candles to emphasize walking with the Fool in this spiral of life. and we decided to call two deities that were also pathwalkers.
Now, sometimes you worry about time in these things. We had 90 minutes.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about Ellen for a second. No, you're going to go straight for my throat. Okay.
I'm throwing you right under the bus right
All
here
right.
and now.
Do it. Bring it. Bring it.
So I know that we had some listeners there. Don't worry, we'll shout y'all out in a minute. So, for all of our listeners that were there, you might not have realized this unless you happened to see the look I gave Layla at that particular moment. But, we got into a point where we talked about our intent, we talked about what we were doing, the whole point of what we were doing, and then we decide to circle up, cast circle, invoke deity, the whole kit and caboodle. So here I am invoking Ellen of the Ways. Now, Layla knows beforehand like I have this whole detailed thing written out. Like she knew how long it
We
was.
had a back and forth call where you would
We
call
did.
Ellen, I'd call Nunos, and we'd go back and forth. And my power just went out. Okay. When last we left our intrepid witches, we were on the precipice with the fool, waiting to see how.
Bitch, you cut me off.
All right, yes, I did. I cut off our deity call. So talk to me a little bit about the deities and your deity call, and then go ahead and tell the people that I totally messed you up, and I'll say why.
Now, it wasn't that you totally messed me up, other than I really felt that the best things I was going to say was at the very end. But other
I
than that,
know those calls were so good.
it wasn't that you messed me up. It just, and this is where you and I vibe very well. Like it caught me off guard. Like it's almost like if you trip over something, but you don't fall, you like trip and catch yourself and then keep going. Like I
Yeah.
tripped and caught myself and kept going because I was like, what the hell is she doing? I'm not done yet.
That's a good point. And afterwards we talked about that and I was super impressed with our energy together in circle was like right there. Even though we haven't really done major rituals together in how many years? We
What you're
were
saying is we communicate without communicating.
Yeah, we do. So for the ritual, we had decided to call Cernunnos and Ellen of the Ways, as we said, because they're pathwalkers. They're in that liminal space, and we were going to kind of be in that time out of time, that space out of space for this particular working. We wanted those types of deities. So Chelle was calling Ellen of the Ways, and I was calling Cernunnos, and we had these beautiful calls written out, and we had been furiously working on them right up to the day before, and had a back and forth kind of call going. It was really, really great.
It
But
was.
what happened?
It was, but you just, like I said, it's like tripping and you just kind of catch yourself.
We started out the workshop describing what we were doing, and then we cast circle with a heart to heart circle cast that we used to do in our old community.
Which, by the way, I was so blown away about how many people were there.
Yeah, it was a little more than we had expected. So the circle cast took a little longer than I had expected. It's very nice. You take the hand of the person to your left and you hold it to your heart and you say, from my heart. And then you put your hands over their heart and say, to your heart. We
Cast
cast
the
the circle.
circle.
And then you do that around the entire circle. It's a very beautiful way to connect everyone into cast circle, but it does take a little bit of time. Then after that, Chelle invoked energies into, we didn't exactly call quarters, but Chelle did a beautiful little call where she invoked the energies.
Well, I didn't want to be like hardcore Wiccan, but it's in my
Yeah,
DNA, like we like to say.
right.
So I felt we're casting circle. We got to call everything.
Yeah, I didn't want to call quarters, but I did want to make sure that it was included, definitely, because we're both very earthy people. We couldn't call circle without having the elements there, just not in a Wiccan way.
Yeah, just not in the almighty,
I
that
call
type
the
of thing.
watchtowers of the guardians of the West. No, we
It
didn't want to
didn't go
do that.
down like that. It did
No.
not go down like that.
And then we were going to do these very cool, very beautiful back and forth deity invocations. Chelle calling Ellen and myself calling Cernunnos. And we got about halfway
Bitch interrupts me.
and I did. And I did. And the reason why is because I could feel the energy. These were kind of long invocations. They were
Yeah.
great, but they were a little long. And we hadn't, again, anticipated quite so many people. So we didn't think that the circle casting would take so long. And I just felt like people had been standing around. I could feel the energy in the circle shift. And I didn't want to lose our participants. I wanted to kind of keep the energy slowly building until we moved into the candlelit Fibonacci spiral walk and then the meditation. I didn't want to lose people and I could feel it slipping. And so rather than keep going with these admittedly very gorgeous deity invocations, I kind of gave Chelle the silent look.
Oh, look.
The look that she immediately picked up on. And we both, without saying a word, without any type of outward sign, immediately moved on to the next part together. And that, even though we didn't get to say the cool calls, that was beautiful. That was beautiful magic.
But actually, the next part was my most favorite part.
Yeah, the next part was beautiful.
So you had made these beautiful, beautiful fool cards, which bravo, by the way.
I think it was mostly public domain images of the fool that I just threw into Canva and just put an overlay so they all looked the same of, the number 0 and the
Hey,
fool.
that was time and effort that you put in. Bravo. That's what
Yeah,
I'm
thank
saying.
you. We wanted
You
those
know?
to be like a portal, a window, a mirror, something people could look at, a token to help them connect with the fool.
And, what is my most favorite thing doing these things?
A
Having a
takeaway.
takeaway.
That's right.
So you gave everyone a card, and then I led the whole group in a walk around this Fibonacci spiral.
Of beautiful candles lit in this gorgeous ballroom. It was beautiful. It was absolutely
It made
stunning.
my finger hurting all worth it.
We'll definitely put up more pictures of that for sure. We did this beautiful spiral walk. Chelle had found this amazing
Great
chant.
chant.
I'll put a link to the chant and we replace the word lady with fool. So, fool of the labyrinth, we chanted as we went around. It was really cool.
I think that is where we were able to pick back the energy up and kind of get it back
Absolutely.
into a flow. And there was something about walking that spiral. Maybe it was because I was first, having everyone behind me chanting that. I don't know. There was something surreal about it.
Yeah. Ellen of the Ways leading
Yeah,
people
I felt like Ellen.
down the enchanted path, right? It was beautiful. So the Fibonacci spiral led into a center circle. We had everyone sit down in this circle, and we did a really cool meditation to meet the fool on the spiral because we talked about life not being a straight path. It's not linear. And the fool is not just the beginning, it's also the end. So there's a cycle there. So we went through this spiral, met the fool, learned some lessons, and then came back up and retraced our steps. It was a very cool ritual.
But my next favorite part was right before we retreated back through the spiral, we gave participants the option
Mm.
to either keep their fool card, stay on their current path, or exchange it for an infinity card, which were actually the same prints, but instead of the 0, they had the infinity on them.
Yep.
And I feel like it was almost split between people who kept their card and people who picked up a infinity card in exchange.
I think so. I think most people kept their card. It was slightly more than 50%, I think, but it was really close. Yeah, so the Infinity card was very popular. And then at the end, some people did come and request extras to take home with them, which, again, takeaways are cool. We made
Love
sure
takeaways.
Chelle loves those, so we had to have one. And it was wonderful. But the coolest part of this ritual was how it echoed and reverberated throughout the entire weekend.
The synchronicities, like how many
Holy
times did
cow.
we look at each other and be like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah, this particular ballroom had rituals, one or two a day throughout the
Over
entire.
the several days, yeah.
And it seemed like from the opening ritual, then ours was second, the Hecate ritual that night, the themes of being on the spiral, walking the
Built
path,
on each other.
the idea of be here now. Everyone kept saying some of these same phrases and
Journeys kept
ideas.
being said,
Yeah,
transformation kept being
being
said,
on the precipice. It was just the
liminal
chills.
spaces kept being said.
You're going to expect to hear some of those because we do the same types of rituals, but some of these phrases and ideas you don't
No,
see
these
every
were
day.
these weren't just this was definitely not coincidence,
The
in my opinion.
synchronicities, it was beautiful to see the magic layering like that just day after day. And of course, being followed almost immediately by Lara Tempest Zakroff
No
doing
pressure.
right, doing a Hecate at the Crossroads ritual. And then the next morning, Kristoffer, and Mhara doing a Caradwin ritual again in the exact same place. We had altars in the same places, and it was just the
I didn't
layers.
realize it at the time, but because I am who I am, I felt the irony of one, so the opening ritual, they had their thing that they did, but then our ritual, the second ritual, I invoked Ellen of the Ways, and then the ritual immediately following, they invoked Hecate.
And then the ritual immediately following that, they invoked Caradwyn.
I was like, man, what's going on here?
So much good stuff. But yeah, this sacred space definitely opened those doors. We were definitely standing at the crossroads and learning there and learning so much in that
Well, and
space.
like we said in the beginning, they create a sacred space for sacred
They
space, and
do.
truly they meet that goal and exceed it.
They do. And then all the participants help to raise that energy, and you can feel it as you walk around. And the interesting thing for me is I loved all the workshops this year. And again, I had trouble picking which ones to go to in the time slots. But last year, I felt like it was all happiness and joy and light, and I loved meeting people. And this year, there was a ton of that, but it also felt very, I had a lot of work to do.
Deep,
Like it was very
deep.
deep.
It was
Yeah,
deep,
it was.
deep in a good way.
Very good, but I felt myself, and I'm still doing it. I'm still, there's a lot of shadow work it seemed to uncover, a lot of deep things that I needed to like journal and work through, and it's been pretty amazing, but tough. This year's a little different.
If I had to put it in my shell way, I'd say last year they were fun shops, and this year they were literally workshops.
Yeah, yeah, the work was pretty deep this year for a lot of people. I heard, there was a lot of emotions going on. Now, our ritual wasn't so heavy. Our ritual was kind of putting people's feet on the path and saying,
But they got heavy as it went.
it really did. We kind of put them, they were like, it's going to be okay. There'll be candles to guide your way. There'll be a nice person with a pack and a dog. You're going to be all right.
But in 2 hours, Hekate's showing up,
That's
folks.
right. And she's going to kick your ass. So grab that pack, pet the dog, and be ready.
And just when you thought you were okay, you're waking up to Caradwyn.
That's right. In the cauldron of transformation. That's what I call my coffee in the morning. So, yes, the workshops, the people, and oh my gosh, the people. I cannot even count how many listeners that we met. Ari Star and Val and Holly and Liz and oh my gosh, so many people.
You know, so Kathy, Kathy, I love you, but for some strange reason, I just want to call you Kat, and I wanted to call you Kat the whole sacred space, and I still want to call you Kat. But I understand it's Kathy, but I'm just going to call you Kat. And don't forget Amy and Amy.
I love Amy and Amy. We met them last year and oh my
We
gosh,
did. We
cool people.
did.
Very cool
So
people.
then, we connected with some of our old workshop friends, some of our old presenter friends, and then we connected with new presenter friends. It was definitely a time for, it felt very much like a intentional community building. Almost like there's a lot of work to do and none of us can do it alone. So here we all are, like a community building
Yes.
work thing. Like, you know what I'm trying to get at?
100%. Yes. I absolutely felt that too. It felt like we need each other, especially now. We definitely need to be here together.
Like we all need to be a part of the collective.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Oh my gosh.
that's kind of how the whole thing pulled together for me is kind of like it takes a village, people.
And it's funny that you say that because that's one of the biggest takeaways that I came with it. I'm going to this very small UU church that's not too far from me that has a little pagan community, and I'm going to try and work with them, and bring it home, bring it smaller and spread that. I want to spread the information that we learned to the people in my community. So I'm very much looking forward to starting like a once a month group at this little UU church. But I think a lot of people felt that building that community, taking the energy that we all kind of built up there and spread that out into our local communities when we all go home and kind of bring that energy back with us because we really need that.
Now, let's just quick touch on the variety of things that we were able to experience workshop wise.
Holy cow.
What was your favorite?
Oh,
I'm gonna make you pick.
you're going to make me pick a favorite child. Oh gosh. All right. Well, I really liked the last one we went to was Christian's, and that was the Alpine Witchery. And we are going to have Christian on our show, but I loved his because the history was fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. I don't want to give anything away right now, but you are going to want to catch the episode with
Oh
Christian
yeah.
Brenner because it was eye-opening to me, some of the things that he has to chat about.
I adore folk magic from all over, and I like seeing the similarities and the differences. And so that was cool. I also liked Ness Bosch. You know me and bones, and Ness is a bone, blood, skin magic witch. Very, very cool
That
chick,
is so your vibe.
right? So yeah, we're gonna be talking to Ness as well. So we got to talk about ink magic, tattoo magic, and blood and bone. She's got a great book. So that was nice. I really, honestly, surprisingly, I had a lot of fun. Okay, not surprisingly, I love Mat Auryn. He's amazing. Absolutely phenomenal psychic tarot dude.
I was taken aback and that was a great workshop and that
I
was
had so much
definitely
fun.
in my top two or three.
Yeah, it was definitely in the top. His workshop on the psychic art of tarot was really, really good.
Yeah, yeah. I got to take a moment and this isn't necessarily a workshop, but let's talk about my fangirl moment when I saw Kristoffer Hughes for the first time.
Okay. Well, yeah, the Carowin ritual was definitely right up in the top. It was amazingly well done. He did an awesome job in keeping an entire room of 200 people,
There,
150
yeah, there had
people
to be at least 200
at
people in
least.
there.
He and Mhara did a wonderful job keeping the information, the laughter, the energy going. And you could feel the energy moving around when he was working the energy, working the circle. And honestly, I had a funny moment because
You did.
well, we're not going to talk about the time I forgot how to say my freaking name.
Oh,
Uh,
that's what I thought you were going to say because that was funny.
that was funny. But in a past episode, when we were talking about altar tools and ritual tools, I talked about a bowline, which is a sickle looking knife. It's like a crescent moon looking knife. And I mentioned I'd only ever seen one in use once.
Until now.
Until now, I have a second time. Kristoffer Hughes had a very gorgeous, very large bowline that he used as an athame in the ritual, and that was very, very cool. So
It
that was probably my
absolutely
favorite
was.
one, was the ritual to Carradwin.
That was absolutely my favorite, and not just because it was him.
It was phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Well
And
done
then
ritual.
Laura Tempest Zackroff did the
Dang,
Hecate ritual, and Lord, that was fabulous. That was right up there with
powerful,
Christopher's. Yeah, yeah.
powerful. You know, if you can get, again, almost 200 people to sit silent at the end of this gorgeous ritual where she embodied Hecate and stood at the crossroads in the room and allowed people to come to her in circle and receive a blessing from Hecate. That took what, like half an hour, 20 minutes,
Yeah.
half an hour? The rest of us sat and held space
Silently.
silently for half an
Silently.
hour, silently in this room, in this Hecate ritual. We just sat there and held that energy, and it was freaking cool. It was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
amazing. Amazing. But yeah, sorry. What was your favorite?
I actually would have to say that Christian's was my favorite. So I was glad you said that.
So good.
He's just I think what he has to talk about, and like I said, I don't want to give too much away because we are going to interview him soon, but just very interesting history, very interesting information. And I didn't necessarily know that Austria had its own folklore traditions. So,
Or
you
witch
know,
trials.
or witch trials, yeah. And that was just, like I said, eye-opening. And I really
Eye-opening.
dug what he had to say.
As always, I absolutely adore Jhenah Telyndru. Fabulous,
Oh,
amazing, super cool witch.
well, let
Holy
me tell
cow.
you.
No, please don't tell them anything.
No, I was gonna say, I would have to say that her workshops are always my top favorite workshops.
Mine too, and it's so sad I'll never be able to go to them again.
Speak for yourself, jerk. But she leads the Sisterhood of Avalon, which I totally dig. So she never puts on a bad workshop. Very information packed. She's just a good presenter. I love what she presents every time I see her.
After one of her workshops that we went to, we've been talking to her also about coming on the show. So we went up to say hello and gave hugs.
I thought you weren't going to tell them.
I'm going to tell them. I have to explain why I can't ever talk to her again and she will never ever be on the show. Is because I then proceeded to hug this woman. Now, Jhenah and I are close to the same height,
5 foot nothing.
if you can believe that. Gorgeous woman, holy cow. And she has the most beautiful head of black curly hair. Okay. I hug her and put my arm around her, and I'm wearing this very cool beaded spiral bracelet. It's wire and it has a hook on the end, and that freaking hook caught in her hair so badly in the first few seconds. It was like that bracelet fell in love with her hair and never wanted to come out again. I almost started crying. I was like, Michelle, please come help me.
But I had the pleasure of digging your bracelet out of Jenna's hair,
Yeah.
which, for as briefly as you hugged her, that was pretty tangled and took me a few minutes.
Apparently, I never wanted to let her go.
So, as much as you were mortified by getting tangled in her hair, I appreciate the fact that you gave me the opportunity to touch her hair.
Yes, so we can never talk to her again. We will never, ever. I just can't do it. Okay, that's not true. We did see her several times after that, and she thankfully forgave me. But
Don't worry, folks, I'll turn the tide on that. We're still
yeah,
working on having her
I
on.
just wanted to drop right through the floor. But that was not our only fun and interesting moment with one of the more famous of our fellow pagans that were there. We did get a chance to talk to Kristoffer Hughes and bring some books to have signed by
Why
him
do you have to bring this up?
because you are now famous amongst Kristoffer and his friends, and you need to tell why.
First of all, the fact that he's going to remember me for this
Oh,
just
yeah.
makes me
Yeah.
giggle. Just makes me giggle.
You're going to be the American who introduced him to his next book title.
So, the story here, folks, is once upon a time, I don't know, a year ago or so, Layla and I decided we were going to get Kristoffer Hughes's book, Cauldron Born. So, fabulous book, by the way. I suggest y'all read it.
Great book.
So this book arrives at my home, and my sweet darling love sees this book, and I don't know if it's age or silliness, but he thought it was called cauldron porn.
It's in like an old English font. It kind of looks like cauldron porn.
So then, I go back to my coven people and I'm like, hey, coven people, isn't this hysterical? He calls it coven porn. So now my coven like totally calls it cauldron porn. So I got the coven calling it cauldron porn. We call it cauldron porn here at home. You and I now call it cauldron porn. So silly old me decides in my fit of fangirling and losing my brain, whereas you forgot your name, I
I
forgot all
did.
sensibility. And I tell Kristoffer Hughes this story about how we call his book Cauldron Born. We call it Cauldron Porn.
He loved it.
He
He
loved it.
thought it was hysterical.
To which I found out the next morning because I actually had to mention it to him again the next morning. I, I
Just so
had
he wouldn't forget,
I had to
like
stay
you would.
relevant. I had to stay relevant. And come to find out that evening, he ended up texting his friends back in Wales and said that he knew what his new book title was going to be, Cauldron Porn. So, folks, when Cauldron Porn gets published, you have me to thank, and you
That's
are
right.
welcome.
Hopefully, she'll get some royalties from it because we're running low on tea, folks. So yes, so we definitely kept our fellow pagan presenters in stitches the entire weekend. And oh my gosh, just had such a great time. And I do want to mention a couple of our listeners. One, we did have a birthday girl who was there.
We did.
That was very fun. She came all the way from California and we got to sing happy birthday to her. So that was very cool. Thank you so much for taking such a long trip to come out. I also wanted to mention this one young woman who, in Mat Auryn's workshop, he handed out cards to everyone. Chelle and I both managed to get knights.
Yeah,
I got the Knight of Pentacles and you got the Knight of Swords.
I got the Knight of Swords.
And then the Fool was right in front of us, which I thought was fun. But when I turned around to see the young person behind me, or the person with the card behind me, it caught my eye and I immediately knew I had to read for them. And so I asked if I could. And she just happened to be a listener who's a tattoo artist. So I wanted to mention her very quickly, give a shout out to Ari Starr, and I'll put some information, some links down to her tattoo shop because she's local to Towson and her tattoos are gorgeous. She showed us a picture of one she had just done, like a chest piece with a crow skull and wings. It was very, very
It was
beautiful.
gorgeous.
Gorgeous. So next time I'm down, we're gonna have to get a tattoo from Ari Starr. But
Hey, we did it last year. We should do it next year. Make it
that's
an every other
right.
year thing.
Absolutely. But yeah, Mhara's workshops. If you ever get a chance to go either online or in person to a workshop with Mhara Starling,
Worth it.
not only is she hysterical, but so freaking knowledgeable. She just presents information. You're laughing, you're learning, you're having such a good time, and at the end of it, you feel like she's your best friend and you just want to go hang out.
I think I felt that way with everybody there, to be honest. Whether,
Yeah, I did.
I mean, whether it was our listener friends or our presenter friends. I mean, we just it was just it was a good time.
It
Everybody had a
really
good time,
was.
and we were all just kind of happy and chatty.
And I love that about festivals is it's easier. I'm an introvert. I am so shy and I
We even smoked with a listener.
we did. That was fun. Hopefully this listener will be going to Brushwood Folklore Center this year as well. So
We'll be
that will
looking for her.
summer festival season is coming up pretty quickly, and we should be hearing about a couple of festivals that we're hoping to present at coming up here real soon. So that'll be
Stay tuned
cool.
for more
Stay
info.
tuned. The other thing I want to touch on is one thing that we did almost daily the entire time we were there is in the morning we would draw a sigil for the day, and then at night we would draw some cards and kind of get an overview of the lessons learned for that day.
I think we were really good in the beginning.
Hmm.
And then we kind of got a little off kilter towards the end, but I think it was because it just got deeper and deeper as the week went on.
It really did. And we kept staying, I mean, we were up early in the morning, going down to workshops and things first thing in
Up
the
late at
morning,
night.
and then staying up late, late at night talking and, all the things going on. So it was difficult. But I did like that. I did like having I tend to do sigils a lot, especially when I'm out and doing witchy things, because it helps to keep me focused for the day. If I do a word or a phrase and
And you
turn it
even
into a
taught me a
sigil.
new way to do a sigil.
I did. Do you want to tell them how we did it?
Okay, just make sure I'm remembering this correctly. We drew a triangle,
Hmm.
and then around the triangle, we drew the alphabet, and then picked a word for the day.
Yep.
And then what was it? We circled the first letter and then drew a line to the second, drew a line to the third, and so on. And then put a slash on the last letter,
Hmm.
and then made a composite of that on a new piece of paper
Yep.
and kind of drew it all out.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So we chose a triangle shape, the three sides, the delta, all of that. It was, it's a good symbol. And then you separate the alphabet, write a third of it on one arm, a third on the next, and a third on the last. Write out your word or your phrase. Eliminate any duplicate letters. You only want each letter to appear once. And then exactly what Chelle said. You circle the first letter, draw your line to each letter, keep going, and then the last letter you put a slash through, and it makes a neat little symbol. Most of the time, I think we used a triangle. I did
Yeah.
use a circle once, and I think I used a square once. So you can do any shape that you want. There's all sorts of different ways to do sigils, and we'll get more in depth in that in another episode. But they're really great for festivals or if I'm at a conference. It really helps me to focus for the day, to have like a phrase or a symbol something that I can look at to help keep me on track.
And I think with the card pulls at night, I think we did anywhere between like 3 and 5 card pulls.
Hmm. Yeah, and that was nice, especially to do it shared.
Yeah.
By the second night, Chelle had bought several decks.
We had choices.
So we had choices. We both brought several decks with us. I did get the Bee Tarot signed by Kristoffer Hughes, which made me very happy. Even though he said the Yule Tarot is his favorite.
Well, I got Cauldron Porn signed by Kristoffer Hughes.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. That's right. Before anyone else gets it, you got a cauldron.
Right, right.
But it was really nice to be able to, kind of decide what deck we wanted, pull some cards, and then talk about a little bit.
Yeah, because we did use a different deck every time.
And that was kind of neat. I liked being able to do that. That was
Yeah.
fun. Yeah. So we had a little magic going on. And as usual, we set up an altar in our room. We do like to set up our away altars. This time it got to be a little elaborate because we did bring extra since we were setting them up for the
It was
ritual.
more like an altered table.
Right? People have their little pocket altars in the Altoid tins, and Chelle's bought a tubby exclusively for travel altars.
No, we both brought a tubby.
That's true. That's true. I was more referring to the one on wheels that you purchased specifically to carry things in.
Well, yeah. Well,
We're
yeah.
both terrible. We're
We are.
terrible. Next year, I am very much looking forward to going to their double
Combined
conference.
conference.
Yeah. Now, who are they combined with next year?
It's called Sacred Space in Between the Worlds. In Between the Worlds, it does their own festival, and I think it's every 3 or 5 years they combined. Um, so actually this next year in 2026, new date and time, instead of being at the end of March, it's going to be at the end of February. and it is going to be what they say, like an hour away from where it has currently been held, I believe. But if you check out sacredspaceconference.org, you can get more information, and they're already starting early registration.
And of course, this summer we are hoping to be at several other festivals. You can check out our website, backonthebroomstick.com. We have a whole list of festivals that are going on. Some we'll be at, some we won't. You can also check out Mandragora Magica. They have a list of pagan festivals, maybe in your state.
And I think that some of our listeners that went to this, and this was kind of their first time, because I know there was one or two that this was their first time doing something like this. I think they would agree with us when we say, give it a try, go at least once, because you will learn so much and meet so many great people.
The amount that you will learn at something like this is
It's
absolutely,
overwhelming.
it really
It's
can be.
overwhelming.
Yeah. But it's also wonderful, and the connections you'll make are just absolutely amazing. So if you do have a chance to go to an in-person festival, whether it's in the woods or in a hotel, definitely worth it.
Take the leap and go.
Oh yeah, definitely go. Maybe don't buy so many books and tarot decks as Shell and I did.
No, do it really seriously. It's fun.
Or maybe do. Maybe do. Yeah, go have fun. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Back on the Broomstick. We will be posting some pictures from our ritual, and maybe I can convince Shell to record that beautiful Ellen of the Ways call that she did, and we'll put that up along with the meditation for you guys coming up in the next couple weeks.
Maybe you'll let me say the whole thing.
Maybe this time I will. All right. Thank you again for listening. We will see you next week on Back on the Broomstick. Please give us some likes, some reviews, some stars. It really helps the show out, and it makes Shell and I cackle like little witches.
Stay wise, stay wicked,
And keep it witchy.